And that first full year on the road, I worked 50 out of 52 weeks on the road.
What?
Well, I don't want to be on the road for first steps and first words. And so I moved back home 7 months after I had gone to LA.
I appreciate you sharing that. I haven't heard anyone talk about that side of him before.
I don't want to give all of my secrets.
Did you ever have any moments when you wanted to quit, doubting the whole decision to quit a corporate job to do this? Hot breath. What's goody? Hot Breathiverse. Welcome back to Hot Breath, the show where you learn comedy from the pros. I am your host, comedian Joel Byers, and our guest today has something most comics don't: work-life balance. His 25-year comedy career started after quitting his corporate job, to where he would go out on the road for up to 2.5 months at a time, grinding it out, sleeping in his car a lot of the times. Yes, he did do all the comedy things that we strive to do as comedians. He did make the move to LA. He did get a Comedy Central special. He did get on Just for Laughs Comedy Festival, and so many more things we see as success. But all of that taught him he would like to see his family more. So he created some side hustles that became so successful as businesses. He is now able to do comedy whenever he wants, which includes having dry bar specials with over 50 million views between all of them, to now having his own businesses and raising a family. What? A comedian that spends time with his family? So we're going to get into all that and much more. So ladies and gentlemen, hot brethren and sistren, welcome to the Hot Breathiverse, Mr. Josh Sneed, everyone.
Thank you, Joel. That was very nice of you.
Yeah?
That was very kind of you to say those things.
It's very true.
It's true. I mean, there were factual statements, you know. It's funny, it doesn't seem like that long ago where I was the comic that was couldn't wait to be on the road. I had no place to be. I wanted to sleep in my car because that meant that I was so far away from home to do stand-up that it didn't make sense to drive back. You know what I mean? So with that comes a lot of good memories, hearing you say those things, because there's some benchmarks in there you mentioned that, when you first start doing open mic nights, they're just kind of like dreams. What if you got your own Comedy Central special? What would the background look like? Mm-hmm. I remember that's what I used to do with the open micers, is sit around and go, man, if you ever got a Comedy Central special, what would your backdrop look like? That was back when you could actually pick what it was. And I was like, oh, mine would look like an empty school classroom, and I was in detention, writing sentences on the chalkboard. And then I got my special, and one of the phone calls was like, what do you want have you given any thought to, what the set should look like? And I was like, I know exactly what I want it to look like. I've been thinking about this, for years. And then walking into the theater in New York to film it, and then just seeing it built out, laid out on the stage. It's that's dream come true kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And it makes all that stuff that you talked about worth it, and then you just kind of get to a point in your life as an adult, at least I did, where it was just I want this to stay fun. I want this to be enjoyable for me for as long as I feel like doing it. Because when I first started, I met so many headliners that they kind of hated comedy. They had an animosity toward it, because it had taken everything from them personally, right? It kept them on the road to where their relationships with their spouse or their children or close friends had kind of fallen by the wayside because they weren't around. And I just, it was like a double whammy for them, because they didn't like doing it anymore, and then they also didn't have a real home life, and I wanted to sort of preserve both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I had to try to find the side hustles, to when I started them, they didn't have to be successful right then, but the thought was, one day, if these can provide enough income to make it so that I don't have to be on the road all the time, then that would be the ideal scenario. And then I'm very lucky that worked out.
How long into your career did you start these?
So the t-shirt company, I started in 2005, so that was 18 years ago. And that was started with a buddy of mine.
So that was 18 years. You've been doing it 25? correct? So 7 years into your career, you're already thinking, okay, let me get a little strategic here.
I got on like a fairly quick path, I think, in terms of, at least at that time, of how quickly I transitioned from just kind of doing open mics and local shows to going in full time. So February of 98, that was the first time I ever went on stage. It was a month before my 21st birthday, and I just fell in love with it right away, you know? And being 20, working, single, no kids, like, it was so easy for me to just be at the comedy club every night, you know, just soaking everything I could learn in like a sponge. And Cincinnati didn't have a real big scene. We had one club. There weren't, like, it's not like today where there's like, you know, shows in people's basements and stuff. Like, it was like you got on stage at the open mic night or you didn't really get on stage. And so, you know, I just tried to work as often as I could locally, to learn, to get better, and then start to try to build relationships with some of the headliners that were coming through town. And I was very blessed with, you know, Greg Warren is a friend of mine. He's the first person that I ever met in stand-up. He ran the open mic night when I started, and he was also a Procter & Gamble employee at that time, which he talks a lot about in his new special, Selling Peanut Butter.
Yeah.
So it was like we had a lot of parallels. He was, you know, he's just a little bit older than me, but we were both had corporate backgrounds, and he was just like, so like, if you're going to meet one person as the first person in stand-up, like, that's the guy you want to, you know, to kind of be like a little bit of a mentor. I don't know if he'd call himself that, but he really was for me. And so I got as much work as the club would give me, and Go Bananas, my home club, being the only club in town and being known as like a really good club, they were able to get like just awesome comics. I mean, they'd have Chappelle and Hedberg and Geraldo and, you know, like all the guys.
Oh my God.
And I would
watch them,
and I'd get my first pick. I'd get to work with them.
Oh
yeah. So they would say, like, you know, so a long story longer, when Greg transitioned from running the open mic night to really starting to look at having a full-time career in comedy, I took over the open mic night. And at the time, the open mic nights were not very well attended by audience members. And so we were trying to think of a way to get new open micers, because what we learned was when somebody does stand up for the first time, they tell everyone they know. So if we could get more people to try it, we could get more people to come watch it. And so the only request that I had for taking it over was that I got to host all of those shows, and that I got first choice each month of which week to MC, because there weren't a ton of MCs either. So I would cherry pick like all the guys, you know, that come through town. And it was just so beneficial to me, and I think it helped me get better quicker. You know what I mean? Like having real amounts of time at a good club in front of real audiences helped me progress a little bit faster. And so in July of 2001, Procter & Gamble announced cutbacks and offered voluntary separation packages to anybody that wanted one. And so I just thought that, you know, here's my chance. You know, I was kind of going back and forth on whether or not I wanted to do comedy full time. And I felt like I had made enough relationships with some headliners to get me in some clubs outside of my, you know, Cincinnati radius. And so I took a voluntary separation package. And so I found myself doing stand up full time, like 3.5 years after I started.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
So by the time 2005 came around, I'd only been doing it, you know, 7 years, but I'd been on the road full time for 4 years.
Wow.
And that first full year on the road, 2002, I worked 50 out of 52 weeks on the road. So I was on stage a lot, like a lot, you know. And it, like I was saying, at the time, I loved it. You know, I didn't think about how often I was gone or who I wasn't seeing. Like that was my only focus, was to get out and do stand up.
I always ask people about like their like worst bombing or like worst gigs. I mean, what were some of yours, or like one that sticks out?
There's two that stick out. There was one.
You just had a PTSD there.
Yeah. Well, one I talk about on stage, and I didn't even, like, it was so bad that I never even thought about telling it as like a horrible comedy story. It just sort of came out when I was on the Bob and Tom show one day, and we were talking about hell gigs, and I started telling this story, and then somebody was like, "You need to talk about this on stage." So when I tell it on stage, I open with saying, like, it's great to be here, and I mean that, because this is a good gig, and I know a good gig because I've done terrible gigs. And when I had first started doing stand-up, a woman from the Dayton Dragons baseball team, which is the single A team for the Reds, came up to me after a show and had this idea. Minor league baseball teams are known for like all the silly stuff that they do between innings. And she was like, I got this idea that that a comedian would dress up like an umpire, and that the umpire would come into the dugout, like the real one, and then you would put on the mask and go out, and then we'd make an announcement that, hey, well, we got a couple minutes. The umpire is also a comedian, and then you go out and you do jokes dressed like the umpire. And she was like, we'll pay you. And she's like, it's a sold out crowd. I mean, I've been doing comedy 6 months.
She's like, $100, come on out.
She's like, we'll pay you. And I was like, all right, I'm 6 months in, I'm getting paid.
Right,
stand up in front of 12,000 people. Awesome. So I drive up to Dayton. And right before I'm supposed to go out, I've got the whole gear on. The umpire, there's like a close play at the plate, and the umpire makes like the wrong call, and the star player jumps in his face and starts jawing with him, and he throws him out of the game. And then the manager goes out to argue, and he gets thrown out of the game. And now everyone hates this guy that I'm about to pretend to be. And I'm just, and the dude that was with me was like, do you want to wait a couple innings? I was like, yeah, And so then they're like, it's such a longer story than this, but they ended up making us go to the away team's dugout, because the umpire said, if we're still going to do this comedy thing, I don't want to be in the home team dugout with all these players and stuff who hate me.
Right.
So now we move. He comes over, and they had this guy who walked around with the mascot between innings. He was like this big. He's a linebacker for the Jets who lived in Dayton, Ohio in the summer. And he would throw out T-shirts to the crowd. Like, everybody loved this guy. And he had told me before I go out, he's like, if anything goes weird, I'll come out and, smooth it over. And I was like, awesome. So sure enough, they make the announcement. I put the mask on. I start walking out. I'm getting booed as I'm just walking to home plate. Like, you suck, And so I started doing my act, and they're kind of listening, like they've stopped booing. And so I'm just like, I don't know if I should just wrap this up. And I go there. I'd been making fun of the flea market and people who go to the flea market. And I say, are there any NASCAR fans here tonight? And they're like, and I was like, NASCAR is huge at the flea market. Mm-hmm. And then, boo, they start throwing pretzels and hot dogs and stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do, because like my time's up. and then I see that guy, he comes jogging out of the dugout, and I'm like, oh, cool, he's coming, to tell everybody it was just a big joke or whatever. And he, at full speed, spears me, just like crushes me. And I'm just like laying on the ground, like, I don't know if I'm concussed or if I've had like a spinal injury or whatever, but the place is losing their mind. Like, they are, it is the coolest thing they've ever seen. And so I remember this, he picks up the microphone on the ground that I had dropped, and then he just grabs me with his other arm and throws me over his shoulder. And he was like, guys, I'll take out the trash tonight. And they're like, yeah, And I just remember like going on his back off the field, like I can't breathe or anything, And he gets me underground, and he's like, "You all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was crazy." And he goes, he goes, "Were you crying out there?" And I was like, "No." I couldn't breathe. I was like, "I can't believe I did this for $35."
$35. Oh, I said 100. I was getting greedy.
Yeah, $35. I had invited my parents to come watch me. They were in the stands. I was like, "Mom, Dad, come watch me do stand up in front of all these people."
A big deal.
So that's the one that immediately jumps out.
Yeah.
Like hell gigs. In a club, the worst one was an urban night, an Apollo night in Cincinnati that I was invited to perform on. That Chad Ochocinco, former Bengals player, it was his night, and my buddy Gary Owen was like, "Come do some time."
Oh yeah, he's from Cincinnati.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know if that's the right environment for. So my wife, and he's like, "They'll love you. Come on, I'll give you a good introduction." And I'm like, I just don't know. And so, because I'd been to those shows before, and I know you talked to Earthquake. Like I had done a ton of like hosting for Earthquake and RNSJ and some more, and those are fine. But the Apollo nights, they just pick someone that they've decided they're not gonna like. No matter what.
Oh, I've done those in Atlanta all the time, yeah.
And so I go up and I don't even get like the mic out of the mic stand, and I'm just getting booed and booed. And I was just like, this is dumb. Why am I doing this? And so finally I just go, all right, cool. And I just put the mic in the mic stand, and I'm like, this is the worst experience I think I've ever had in a comedy club. And I walk off stage and Gary runs up and just starts scolding the audience. And he's just like, "This guy is my friend. You didn't even let him get a joke out. He's been on Comedy Central." And I'm just like, that's really cool of him to do that, And he goes, "I'm going to bring him back up here." And I'm going, "Do not." I'm off the stage. "No, do not. I'm bringing him back up here, and you guys are going to be nice, and you're going to let him." And I'm like, why is he doing it? He's like, "Give it up again for Josh Sneed." And I'm like, oh. And I walk back up there, and they're quiet. I get the mic out of the mic stand. So the other, boo, they just start again. I was like, and I just put the mic back in and walked off stage. And that one still stings a little bit because I never even got a chance. It wasn't even like I bombed hard. Like it was like I didn't even get a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, we all go through those gigs, as a comedian. Like there's always those ups and downs. Like did you ever have any? Because I've been doing it 13 years. Did you ever have any moments of like you wanted to like quit, or you're like doubting the whole decision to quit a corporate job to do this?
I don't think so. And I say that just because like my career has been a lot of good fortune and luck, but also being prepared, like all kind of intertwined together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when in 2003, I'd been doing comedy full time for a couple years, and I made the finals of this Comedy Central contest called the Laugh Riots. And what they were doing is they would have shows all over the country, and then one winner from each show got picked to go to Los Angeles for the finals. And there were some great comics that had made, like Kyle Kinane was in the finals, Chad Daniels, I think Chris Fairbanks, just some really solid, super funny dudes, Kostaki. And so I go out to LA and I decide I'm going to move to LA and try to capitalize off of like whatever, like little bit of heat or, you know what I mean, kind of comes from this. And like I said, at that point, I'm only 2 years into full time. So I haven't had anything but just like living my dream on the road. And so I moved to LA, and I'm starting to get some like into some of the local clubs. And then I signed with a manager. And I said, whatever he tells me to do, I'm going to do. Like, I'm young. I have no idea what I'm doing or what it takes to make it out here. So whatever he says, I'm going to listen. And so I signed with this guy, and he says, no more shows in LA. And I was like, what? And he goes, until you've either done a festival or been on TV, I don't want you doing any shows in LA. He's like, it's very important for people to see you in the right light when they make their first impression of you. And if you just do some show where you have a bad set or it's a bad crowd, then that's their that's how they see you, is like somebody who's just not ready. He was like, I want them to see you in the right light first. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to pretend to know better. And so my roommate at the time got engaged and then got married within 5 months of meeting the girl. Gets engaged and married. So now I'm living with a married couple in LA. I'm not doing any shows when I'm not on the road because my manager told me not to. And so almost instantly I was like, I think I'm just going to move back to Cincinnati. I mean, I was there for like 7 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a tough pill to swallow, but a good friend of mine, Finesse Mitchell, had made Saturday Night Live. So he had moved from LA to New York, and I was going to New York all the time to hang out with him and hang out at SNL. And I was like, maybe that's a better play for me. But while I decide, I can't stay in LA because I'm on the road constantly just to afford living here. So I moved back home 7 months after I had gone to LA.
Wow.
And so I moved home January of 2004, and then July of 2004 I got Montreal, and August of 2004 I got Premium Blend on Comedy Central. So I'd been home 5 months, and I had done both of the things he told me I had to do, but I had spent all my money moving back home.
Oh my God.
So I was like, I'm not going to go right back. I'm just going to stay here for maybe a year, decide what I want to do.
Like all your money? Like, did you move back home or?
I moved back to an apartment.
Oh, but not on your own.
Well, see, here's what happened. When I'm going out to LA at, 23 or whatever, like, I'm going to be there for a long time. So I'm not going to take furniture. I'm going to go buy it new out there. I'm going to get a whole new setup. So I get out to LA, I buy all this brand new furniture. And then 7 months later, I'm like, I will get pennies for this, and I don't have anything back home. So I spent like $4,000 to move this brand new furniture back home, like have a truck, like drive it back to Cincinnati. And then I just loaded up my car with everything else and drove home. And so I'm in Cincinnati. I do Montreal and I do Premium Blend. And then the next year, 2005, I decide I'm going to submit for a half hour, and I don't get it, but they invite me to perform at the South Beach Comedy Festival in July of 2006. It was January of 2006. It was the first time that Comedy Central was going to try their own festival. And I knew there really wouldn't be any industry there because Comedy Central's the one putting it on, but it was like, to get in better with them and a free trip to Miami in January when you live in Ohio. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And so I was put on an outdoor show that was free, which those two things, are typically recipes for disaster for comedy. Nobody paid to get in and outdoors.
The baseball game, prime example.
Yes. So,
outdoors.
But the show is great. It's Sebastian Maniscalco is also on the show. Relatively unknown Sebastian Maniscalco. Brett Ernst is on the show. Jessica Curson. A lot of super solid comics.
Oh my God, every comic you're naming is like a killer.
They're so great.
It's so cool.
And so the shows were really fun. The way that Comedy Central had it set up at this outdoor venue was really cool. And then I get off stage from one of my shows, and this girl goes, "You got to come with me." And I was like, "Is something wrong?" And she's like, "No." She's like, "Greg Giraldo is at the theater down the street, and he didn't bring an opener. And so we showed him the list of people on this show, and he knows you, and he's like, have Josh come do it." So we scurry down to this theater, and he's like, "Thank you for doing it." I'm like, "Dude, of course." I mean, he's like one of my rest in peace, but one of just the all-time.
Oh,
great.
For sure.
And he's like, "Can you just do like 20? And I was like, "Of course." So I go out and I do 20 minutes. And then after the show, we're walking to this red carpet event that Brett Ernst and I are going to be hosting for Comedy Central. And the girl gets a call, and she's like, "He is? He does? Oh, he does." And she's like looking at me like, "Okay, I'll let him know." And I was like, "What was that all about?" And she said that the president of Comedy Central was in the audience to see Greg Giraldo, and he wanted to make sure that he met me after the show at the after party.
Wow.
And so I got to meet Doug Herzog, and then 2 weeks after that, I got offered my Comedy Central Presents. And so then that comes out, and then they have this stand-up showdown on Comedy Central's website, and I ended up coming in second behind Jeff Dunham, who was already doing arenas, so it felt like I came in first. And then that got me a record deal with Comedy Central, so my first album was on Comedy Central Records. And I say all that because it always was just like a little bit, every year felt like just a little bit of progression to something, you know? And it never, there was never that long of a gap where I questioned, like, did I make the right decision? Do you know what I mean? And so, in that time, I'd started the t-shirt company with my buddy, and that was kind of giving me something to do during the days. And, you know, he was an art academy graduate, so he would do the design, and then I'd go out on the road and I'd wear our funny t-shirts to radio stations, or I'd sell them at the shows. And that's sort of how we started to build that brand up. And it was just kind of fun, because it was just like spending money, you know, at that time.
But even you having all this success, and literally, I mean, at that time in comedy, like Comedy Central special, I mean, that's it. Like, that's like, you made it. But even at that time, you're like, but I need some other income, because I don't know if this is like, I feel like if I was in that position, I'd be like, oh, I'm the chosen one. I've had all this fast progression. Yeah, I'm invincible. But like, what was it in you that's like, this is all cool, but I'm already thinking long term that I don't want to be doing this as heavily?
Well, it wasn't even that. It was that, you know, so on a sadder note, in 2007, which was like right after my special had come out, my dad got sick, and then he passed in February of 2008. And so I wasn't married. I was still single at the time, but he and I were so close that it gave me this sort of like, I don't know, it was kind of like sobering in a way that, like, man, I thought he was going to be around for a long time, and now he's not. And so if I do get married and have kids, like, I can't just assume that I can be on the road and, you know, I'll come back and everything will be peachy. Like, it really drove home the thing of, like, you got to take advantage of, like, certain moments in their lives that you won't get a second chance at, you know what I mean? And so ironically, when I got my Comedy Central record deal, it was right after my dad had passed away. The week after his funeral, I headlined my home club, Go Bananas, and then a month later, I got the album deal. And they said, where would you like to record it? And I said, I want to record it at my home club, but I was just there like a month ago. And they were like, well, do you think you could do like a Friday, Saturday, and just let people know that this is a special recording, and that they would come back out again? And I felt like I knew enough people that I could let them know, like, hey, this is probably going to be stuff. If you came, it's going to be a lot of the same stuff, but here's the situation. And so in 2 months after I had just played there, I did it again. And then we sold out all 4 shows, and that's how I got my album recording. Well, my now wife was in the audience that night, which I had not met her, but she sent me a note after she had seen the show. And, you know, fast forward a couple months after that, we start dating. And then a year later, we're engaged. You know, a year later, we're married. A year later, we have our first kid. And so, again, it wasn't that much time where I was sort of like, all right, well, I don't want to be on the road for first steps and first words, and you know what I mean? And so the t-shirt company slowly started to become more important as like a supplement than just like something I'd been doing for fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, so it was really cool to kind of see the growth of that, but it was also very nice in that it afforded me the chance to be home for like what I think are like super important moments as a parent and a husband, you know? And so, you know, the plan was always, well, when he gets, you know, a little bit older, like starts kindergarten or something, where my wife isn't responsible for keeping an eye on him 24 hours a day if I'm not around, that'll make it easier to start gradually going back on the road and kind of turning the attention back to picking up where I left off, you know, so to speak, with stand up. And then when he was 5, my daughter was born. And so that kind of like reset that clock.
Wow.
You know, but again, I've been very lucky that during that time where it's been very purposeful, you know, I haven't generated as much material as I'd like. You know, I was able to record the dry bar thing when that opportunity came along, and, you know, the success of that was amazing, you know, both for exposure to new fans, but also like, you know, some income during a global pandemic that no one could see coming.
Yeah.
But, you know, like COVID was like a real wake up call, I think, for a lot of comics of like, if we can't do live shows, what else could we do, you know?
Yep.
And I was lucky because I had something. You know, I didn't start a t-shirt company to help me get through COVID, but it helps, you know. And I had also been approached by a candy company based out of Cincinnati that makes Airheads and Mentos. They had decided they wanted a comedian to run their social media, and knew that I was local and asked if I wanted to, you know, be their voice online. And so I've been doing that for 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And no one knows it's me. You know, so if you're ever talking to Mentos or Airheads, you're talking to me.
Whoa.
And so that's been great supplement income. But what that did is it made me realize that we have skills that if you just think outside of like writing a movie or acting, you know, but like where else is it needed to have a professional comedian writing, you know? Like social media for brands is something that they all struggle with. And whenever they hire an ad agency, it always comes across very sales pitchy. You know, it's not engaging, it's not witty. And so I was like lucky that another company saw that in me. And so, yeah, it's been great. You know,
so cool.
I take summers off. I don't work between
From comedy, right? You don't do comedy during the summer.
Yeah, from mid-May to mid-August, I do no shows. My wife has been stay at home for 6 years, so she hasn't had to work. You know, and all that stuff is like super important. It's very important to me, but you know, to the amount of stress that she has to deal with, like trying to limit that so that she doesn't have any animosity towards stand-up because of how much more work it puts on her plate when I'm gone. You know, like all that stuff like adds up to reducing overall stress in our house, which makes it so much more enjoyable and to not have that kind of pressure.
That's literally where I'm at right now. With pre-pandemic, I was on the road more than ever. I was starting to headline a lot of comedy zones. Like, basically as a comedian, it's like, oh, I worked 10 years I'm a road comic now, like full time and all this. And then pandemic hits, I'm unemployed overnight. And now road gigs are starting to come back. And I'm like, I don't really want to be gone like that anymore. So I'm at a point now of like, well, what else can I do? You know, I'm kind of in like a transitional period right now. Like, what are some other side hustles you've seen comedians do, or advice you have for me? Like, I mean, like, tell me what to do, Josh. I mean, how can I make money from home?
Well, you know, I mean, seriously, it's cliche, but like, if you can just find something that you're good at and you enjoy doing that doesn't feel like work, like, you'll find that the business will come, you know, as you hone your skills in that, you know. I wasn't a skilled tradesman for screen printing, you know, but I found it fun, and I felt like I had a knack for coming up with concepts that translated well to t-shirts. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, I think this podcast is like a great place for you to be, because I mean, you do such a great job with it and you create awesome content with it, you know, that I think you're gonna figure out a way to unlock this, you know, because comparative to what a lot of other people are doing, like you're just doing such a better job at it than they are. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
And that's not really a slight to them as much as it is to like you just see it and you get your vision, you get your aesthetic for it, you know, and I would stay on this path. And then I mean, I've heard of comics doing all kinds of stuff, but it's more of like making ends meet than it is, you know, like I see a future in this and it's like a business that I could scale.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference is like, what are you just trying to supplement your income with whatever so that you don't have to be gone all the time? Or are you trying to find something else that can sort of grow in its own time while you do stand up in hopes that when you're ready to stop, that this can take over and you can live comfortably off of
Sure. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Because that's what happened with the t-shirt company. Like I said, I didn't need it to be successful in 2005. I needed it to be successful by 2015. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know. I mean, I wish there was easy advice, but it really is just find something that you like doing, that you don't have to put the pressure on yourself for it to be successful right now. It can grow while you have this other thing. And then as it grows, you know, who knows what'll happen.
Yeah, I enjoy doing this podcast. I've been doing it 7 years. So I am at a point now of like, all right, we've been doing it. We've interviewed a lot of super like cool people. And now it's like, all right, how can I turn this into a business, basically? So that's where I'm at after doing this for so long as well.
I mean, I don't want to give all of my secrets. Yeah. I'll tell you after we're done here what I think you should do.
The next episode, I'm wearing like gold chains, like, you know, Josh was right.
From your giant home studio.
Yeah.
No, it's I don't know. There's no easy thing, but
Right.
Whatever it is, find it, you know, have an idea, work it out, workshop it out, see if there's a future in it. And if there's not, move on to something else, you know?
Yeah.
But your peace of mind and your stress level and the things that you feel like you have to do to maintain the things that are important to you besides comedy, that's worth the time and effort to figuring out what it is. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
Because as fun as this business is, you know, you get paid. You don't get, I always say, a lot of comics say, you don't get paid to perform. You get paid for all the stuff that you have to do to perform. You get paid to be away from your family and live out of a suitcase and stay in hotels and have canceled flights or rent cars. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you're being paid to do. Getting on stage is the easy part. So, you know, I wish there was a simple answer, but you'll figure it out. Knowing that there should be something is the biggest step. Like, not putting all of your eggs in the basket and just assuming that I can do this forever and it'll always be there. You have the right mindset now of knowing that there's something else that you could be doing. And finding that out will be the fun part, but you're on the right path already, dude.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for saying that. I like the
I read that in a fortune cookie.
I like I appreciate the optimism there, because it really was cool in researching you and us. Because I mean, I would come and watch you at like the old Punchline.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been aware of you for a while, but I didn't realize your story of like, and you coming up around all these other like super successful comedians as well. Like you could see certain trajectories in your career that you could go, but you're like, but I want to do this for me and like my family and like just find a different way.
Two things that I think are very important on that is, one, you have to genuinely be happy for other people's success, right? Like the guys that I would consider like my closest friend, my peers, when I was like kind of coming up through like the feature ranks, you know, Chad Daniels, Roy Wood Jr., Dan Cummins, Jamie Lissow, Pete Lee, you know, like guys that are doing like real cool stuff right now. you know, whether it's just in stand-up or on TV or movies. Like, those were my best friends. And I was so lucky to figure out a way to like be happy for them and not be jealous of them because we were on very similar paths at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's super easy to, I think, get jealous of people you don't know personally and you don't know their backstory. But when you know that you've come from the same spots as some of the other people in the same clubs at the same time, you know, like I love those guys still today, and I'm so happy for all of them. So finding a way to be at peace with your success and not compare it to other people, whether they're, you know, somebody that you consider a peer or not, is huge. But also your definition of success is huge. And I say this whenever I get the chance. Dave Chappelle said something on Inside the Actor Studio that literally changed my life. The second I heard it, it changed my life, because I was living in Ohio. I was debating on whether or not I needed to go back to LA or move to New York if I really wanted to take it to the next step. And it wasn't out of a need. It was just out of like me getting in my own head about what do we typically consider the definition of success as a comedian. And from the first time you start, it's always, do you have your own show? Are you a movie star? Are you a writer? You know, like it was always like the pinnacle of the industry was what you considered success, you know? And Dave, when he was on Inside the Actor Studio, he asked him, you know, what did your parents think when you told them you wanted to become a comedian? And he said they thought it was a phase, you know, they thought that it was something temporary. And one of his parents said, well, will you stop doing it if you're not successful? And his response to them was, well, that depends on what your definition of a success is. And he says, if a teacher makes $40,000 a year and I can make $40,000 a year doing stand-up, I'd rather be a comedian than a teacher. And so when I heard that, I was like, you know what? That's so true. Like, if I can live in pretty much anonymity in Cincinnati, Ohio, and pay my bills, I could pay them just doing stand-up if I wanted, you know. That's success. Like, that's a success in the entertainment industry. Like, just because I'm not famous or selling out arenas, but I can make as good of a living as my neighbor who's a executive for Procter & Gamble, or this guy across the street who's a lawyer, you know. Like, if I can make as much money at them doing this and nobody knows who I am, that's still success, you know? And so if I just learn to be happy that I can make a living doing what I love, then I don't have to worry about the things that I didn't get or all of the stuff that I haven't done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, I would tell any comic who's not, you know, sort of zeroed in on the, you know, selling out arenas or having a Netflix special, like, if you can make a living doing what you love, like, that's success. Like, that's some 90% of the population can't say about whatever it is they do, you know? Jimmy Pardo is like one of my all-time favorite comics, and he shared a quote on his podcast a long time ago that I always think about too. And he said, you know, something along the lines of, and it may not have been his quote, but that's who I heard say it. And he was saying, you know, if you always think of success as a ladder, you know, you're always like trying to climb and like see who's in front of you, and very rarely do you take time to like look down and see how far you've come, you know? And so, you know, I try to remind myself of that sometimes, where it's like, think about anybody that's ever come up to you after a show and said, I've thought about giving this a try. You know, my friends say I'm funny. You know, I can get up there. Like, of all those people, like, how many people actually do one open mic night? And then of those people, like, how many do a second or a third? And then of all the people who like love doing open mic nights, how many get to get paid as an MC one time? And how many get to be regulars? And then how many of those get to be features? And how many of those get to be headliners? And you start with that, and then you get down to this, and you realize that just being a headliner at the Atlanta Punchline is a spot reserved for at the most 52 people in 1 year, and you get to do it every year. Like, how do you not be grateful for just getting that far?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah, that's perspective there.
I think it's just more important to figure out a way to be happy with what you have than constantly worrying about what other people have or the things that you don't have.
Yeah, do you find as soon as you like, because like me right now, I'm like trying to force something to happen. But if you found like when you just like let go, that's when like, oh, that's where the breakthrough is. When you stop trying to like suffocate it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've only gotten one commercial ever, and it was the one audition that I did not care about.
Yeah.
I always think about that. I just went in with this like, whatever, I never get these, you know, and I got it.
Yeah.
The South Beach Comedy Festival, I took it because it was like, it's a free trip to Miami. Well, President of Comedy Central was in the audience, and it got me a half-hour special, you know. Dry bar. Never heard of it, but the tapes look good, so I'm going to do it to get a good tape out of it. And then more exposure than anything I've ever done in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you just don't know. But I think it goes back, and I tried to get this mentality when Last Comic Standing was really big, because I would notice that the people who did really well on Last Comic Standing, that were like seasoned comedians and had like a lot of experience in the clubs, were able, and I see it on America's Got Talent now too, when that opportunity for that like next level success is presented to you, if you're prepared to accept it, then that's what all the hard work was for, you know? So that's kind of like what I try to tell myself is like, if it comes, great. I know that I'm ready for it. I've stayed sharp. I feel like as a comic, I've never been sharper on stage right now. You know, my daughter is now 7, so I've again started to turn back to like generating new material and flushing out these premises I've literally just been keeping in a book for like the last, feels like 10 years.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
Because they're good, you know, they're into their own things now, and they love me and I love them, and they know that I'm around and that I'm not going to be on the road all the time. But, you know, my wife doesn't have to be watching them all the time if I'm not around. So it's easier on her. So now I've kind of started to shift my focus back, and I've been fleshing out new material, and I'm probably, I don't know, 85% to like an hour of material that has not been ever recorded. And so that's like exciting for me at, you know, 46 to like still have that feeling, you know, 25 years into the business of still being like, this excites me. I got new stuff. And I've got people that want to hear it when I put it out. Like that's the goal, right? You know?
Yeah. Was there anything that you learned as we like, maybe like as an encapsulating piece of advice for comics out there? Or is like, there anything you learned from working with all these amazing people that maybe you could apply to like younger comics?
I tried to learn whatever I could. Like I said, I was a sponge. So, I mean, everything from the performance side, like what to do with the microphone, like a mic stand, or, you know, how close to hold the microphone, when to scream, when to whisper, how to deal with the check drop, how to deal with the heckler. Like you can just learn, I feel like, as much by watching professionals as you can by actually being up there. I think they're both important. So I would say be a sponge, go to the club even when you're not on the show to just like network, but also just like see if you can learn something by watching. And then off stage, Larry the Cable Guy taught me a very valuable lesson about like appreciating fans. You know, we did a show once in West Virginia where I think there's probably like 3,000 people at the show, and our show was like an hour and a half, but we were in the lobby for 3 hours afterwards because he let everyone that wanted to come through the line and meet him, he stayed there until the last person left. And so I was just like that. I was like, man, that was really impressive. And he said, that guy that just waited 3 hours the fact that I was still standing here, like, he'll remember that. That guy will be a fan forever. And he was just like, if you just appreciate the people that pay money and come out, like, those are the ones that are going to go out and tell other people that they should check you out. Mm-hmm. And so I try to keep that. I mean, I'm not waiting 3 hours after a show. And it usually can meet everybody that wants to say hi in about 8 minutes.
Just a big selfie.
Yeah. Everybody, it's like, but I just try to remember that because, you know, I'm still kind of getting used to it. I know you've had some big name guys on this show, but it's new to me, even this late into my career, that people show up because you were there. You know, it's such a great feeling. I mean, when you become a headliner, a lot of times the shows that you're doing from the traditional route, not because you developed a huge following online, but just working your way up, right? People are at the show because they wanted to go to the comedy club that night. You know, whoever was there, but they wanted to see a comedy show. And when that slowly starts to shift to people that are there because you're there, you know, and then it gets even crazier to, like, I was in Phoenix back in March, and this couple was like, we couldn't wait to see your show. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, are you guys from around here? And they're like, well, we're from Utah. And I was like, oh, nice. And I go, but you live here now? And they're like, no, we drove here from Utah for tonight. And I'm just like, I can't even wrap my head around it. You know, that Phoenix was the closest I was going to be to Utah. So they're like, let's drive. Like, there are not words for how that makes you feel as a comedian, to know that you've left an impression on a stranger to the degree that they would go through all of that just to watch you on stage for an hour.
Wow.
And so those little moments are what keep me going to want to try to give the best show I can when I am performing, but also to not give up. You know what I mean? Like, know that how cool would it be if there was a room full of people that said that instead of just one table, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my goal in moving forward and trying to progress my career versus just like treading water.
So you almost have the t-shirt business running now. It's like a 30-person operation now, I think. So it's like, now you kind of got that plate spinning. And now that your family is a little more like, they're a little more grown up doing their own things, now you're like, okay, back to what it coming full circle here. Oh, yeah, that's exciting, man.
It is. It's very exciting for me.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this new special, getting it recorded and putting it out there, because just, you know, like the dry bar stuff, as awesome as it was a lot of old material. There was only a couple of bits that didn't exist on a previous album or my Comedy Central special. And so now that I know that there's like an audience out there that's kind of into what I do, like, it's really exciting for me to go, here's something I know you've never heard before, because I haven't had that feeling in a long time.
Oh, well, I'm excited to do this interview at that moment in your career as well. It's a very good time, Josh. Yeah,
let's do it, brother.
Where could people, where would you like people to keep up with you and come see you live? How can they keep up with all your good stuff?
Just at Josh Sneed on whatever social media. I'm on all of them, and I pretty much post the same stuff on all of them. Just try to cover my bases. So, you know, I try to share and create little funny online things. You know, I'm not a big sharer of stand-up clips. I know that's all the rage, and maybe that's what is holding me back, is not sharing more of my act. But I don't want to go down the crowd work hole. As lucrative as I know as it is. There's guys that are and girls that are so much better at it than me. It's not part of what people would actually see at my show. And so that's why I'm not really doing that. And then as far as my material goes, most of what I would put out there now is stuff that's already out there on Dry Bar or Comedy Central or something. All the stuff that isn't is stuff that I'm saving for this next hour. So once that gets done, I'm sure it'll get chopped up into little clips as well. But that's why I'm not sharing any of those now. So the stuff I put out now is more just like memes and, you know, like silly little things that I do or stuff that my kids say. So if you're into that kind of thing, give me a follow or come see me in your town when I'm there, and you can hear the new material.
Yeah, and if people enjoyed this, you know, please reach out to Josh on social media and let him know. And if you're not already, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can get access to this plus over 400 other interviews we've done with comedians all about comedy.
And send Joel money. Like, pay this man for this amazing content because he deserves it and it's worth it. And if you want to see it continue, then you got to support it.
Patreon.com/hotbreathpod.
Done.
We'll see you there. Josh Sneed, thanks for being on Hot Breath.
Dude, thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Woo. That was good.
That was great.
Feel good about that?
I do.
Hot Breath.